to the right.
Oh, sorry, there were two people at once. What'd you say?
Go Richard.
I was gonna say kind of like off-center to like the left or possibly on the right. Give it a bit more space in between.
Okay, so moving this one a little bit more to the right or left. Yeah, that would be a little bit better for sure, because then again you'd be having something that's not so regular on screen. But there's something you could do to make it even a little bit more than that. Was Bart going to say something?
Basically the same thing.
Okay. The thing that I was going to suggest is, if you're looking here, they're both exactly the same size. So let's reduce one in size, or make it bigger, but in this case I'm going to reduce it. So we have objects of two different sizes. Okay, now you have this tension, your eyes are bouncing back and forth between these. If you look at this other image, if I got rid of that line down the middle, if you look at this other image, everything appears to be very static. Like your eye doesn't really go back and forth between the two very much. It sort of sits right in the middle of the screen because you can see both, and there's nothing that's pulling your attention one way or the other. But if you look at this other one over here to the side, somehow your eyes keep going back and forth. It's more interesting. Your eyes want to see the big one, then they want to go to the small one, then they want to go to the big one, then they want to go to the small one. So that's a little better. Now let's take it one step further. We have our big object, we have our small object. Well, let's go back to the other one. You see how they're basically on the same picture plane here? They're almost exactly right next to each other. If we overlap one over the other, okay, now we're really getting some interest, because what's happened? Well, first of all, we've offset them, right? They're no longer balanced, one on one side and one on the other side. Now they're all on one side, which gives you kind of a visual weight to your screen space. But in addition to that visual weight, you've also got one object that appears to be closer to us than the other object. Now, people sometimes refer to the idea that what's interesting here are the intersecting lines. Okay, see how one set of lines intersects the other? Anywhere that there are those, I'm making these gestures to the camera, but you guys can't see me, so this is pointless. But anytime you see these sort of lines intersecting each other, your eye is drawn to those things. Okay, so a logical next step from this would be to say, well, great, if two objects are good, well, wouldn't three objects be even better? But not just any three objects. Objects that are varied in size. Okay, so here we have an object that's medium and small. Over here, we have big, medium, and small. Okay, so this concept, the simple way that I like to refer to it is the use of big, medium, and small, basically. And this is something that we can use not just in our staging, but actually in the rhythm of our animation too. Okay, because, and we've talked about this before. I've mentioned it when we first began animating the bouncing ball. I talked about how when you have a ball bouncing across the screen, it's infinitely more interesting to have a bounce that mixes up, its performance, rather than having an object. Actually, it's too similar. There we go. Rather than having an object that's just doing exactly the same thing all the time. One of these is more visually interesting than the other. Now, that is not to say that there may not be a time when you want the bounce to be exactly the same all the way across. Maybe what you're doing, let me give a new layer, a time where you may want this, let's say you have a few characters. These are my beautiful characters. Okay, let's say these two characters are dancing. Okay, they're holding hands. And let's say we really want them to stand out from the other characters who are dancing all around them. I'm just going to draw one other one. Okay, so if this couple, if this is the background couple who we don't care about, okay, if this couple had a very regular rhythm, maybe went all the way around, these little loops are loops that they make as they go around. If they had a very regular rhythm and maybe we're going like every 12 frames between loops, but this other couple broke that pattern and broke that rhythm and did things on 16 frames sometimes, and then maybe some other things on 4 frames, and then some other things on 8 frames, our eye would be instantly drawn to the couple that was breaking the regular pattern. Okay? So, and if you look what I've done here by drawing these numbers, I basically had a big, a small, and a medium timing. And I combined them all together. Okay, whereas this other couple, they just had at best, I would call it a medium timing. Okay, so this concept of big, medium, and small, like I said, is something that we can use beyond just layout or beyond just staging. Okay, so let's take this idea even a little bit further. Now this is pretty good, but if you look at it, they're still kind of all bunched up there, They're all bunched up, they're all clustered around each other. So what can we do with that? Well, we have our new thing. What we can do is we can think about foreground, middle ground, and background. Okay, we're dealing in three-dimensional space. Even in the old 2D days, they always were concerned with three-dimensional space. So the way that you show in 2 dimensions, if an object is closer or further away, if you have a horizon line, the object that's lower on the paper is closer to you. The object that's higher on the paper is further away. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Now, in our case, we actually do have 3D space, so we can push them into the background. But you can arrive at all different kinds of tricks and things because, you guys have probably seen the jokes where you see a character that's really far away, and then when it walks up close, it's even smaller. That's like a in these cartoons. But for our purposes, discussing what actually makes things more interesting, using the distance, but combining that with the concept of big, medium, and small, you can come up with all sorts of different patterns. Let's again put the ground plane in here just to see. What you're doing now, you're arriving at groupings. Okay, groupings, again, will draw our eye to them. Okay, and having groupings contrasting with sole objects is also very interesting because, again, it creates this visual tension for your eye. Now, scenario, make it even more interesting by taking this large object, and you saw where it was pretty much even with the medium-sized object. If I drop this object even lower down, okay, so now we've got an object that's closer to us. If I drew shadows, if there was a light coming from both angles, it would have shadows like this. Okay, now you begin to feel like our eye can actually step back into the picture plane. Our eye goes from there to there to there. Okay, and maybe then it goes back over to here. So this is creating visual interest. Okay, grouping.